I need you two to be over here where I can see you.
You really want to say?
Yeah, right over there where I can see you smile. See you out of my line of vision there.
All right, John Folse was born in St. James Parish in 1946. He learned early that the secrets of Cajun cooking lay in the unique ingredients of Louisiana swamp floor pantry. Chef Folse seasoned these raw ingredients with his passion for Louisiana culture and cuisine, and from his cast iron pots emerged Chef John Folse and Company. Chef Folse has received numerous national and international accolades over the course of his 30-year plus career. In 1990, the American Culinary Federation named Folse the National Chef of the Year, and in 1999, the Research Chefs Association named Chef John Folse and Company pioneers in culinology. Culinology. What is that?
The marriage of culinary and food science. Culinology.
Due to the efforts of Folse's culinary research team, he is the only chef ever to serve as chairman or president of the American Culinary Federation. And, American Culinary Federation, DIRONA. What is that?
DIRONA, Distinguished Restaurants of North America.
And the Research Chefs Association, which he chaired from 2005 to 2007. In 2006, Folse was inducted into the National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation's College of Diplomats. In 2008, October, Folse was awarded the Louisiana Governor's Cultural Economic Development Arts Award. He holds honorary doctorates of culinary arts from Johnson and Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island, and Baltimore International Culinary College. And this is actually his debut to our class. So how about a round of applause for Chef John Folse?
Thank you. Nice to be here with y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I've interviewed a good bit of chefs, especially in this class during this course, but your resume is very distinctive. And the thing that I noticed most about it is you seem to have several tracks on your career. Chef doesn't seem like the only appropriate title that you should really have. Is that true? Is that how you feel about your career?
Well, you know, I think I'm a perfect example of what one should do, and that is to choose a career that you can root very firmly into the soil of your life, you know, and that's what you're going to be known for. I'm Chef John Folse. In fact, a lot of people think my first name is Chef because, and it's true. Fact is, I was in Washington I was speaking before Congress about 2 or 3 weeks ago on an issue before Congress, and one of the senators said, Chef, and they said, excuse me, is that your first name, Chef? And I said, it's my first name. It's okay with me to call. But I think it's important that you choose a career that, and it's never easy. I mean, it's a lot of times it's accidental that you just find that niche. You study, you plan, but then all of a sudden something happens in your life that puts you in a place that will eventually define who you are. But then once you get there, as I was with a chef, then I started to look at, and accidentally, I shouldn't say it was well planned, that food manufacturing and the need to bring Louisiana's unique cultural experiences and culinary experience globally. So I got into the food manufacturing business. I got into television very early, and now I'm on my 25th season or whatever on PBS. I got into radio and media and publishing, but it's all food related. Everything I do is food related. I don't do anything that's not food. So, and then I think also it's so important that once you choose your career, that you become involved in sharing your experiences with the people who are either in that time frame involved in the same work you're in, or the younger people as this group is here today. And so I think you should become involved in organizations that best represent your career. So you mentioned president of the American Culinary Federation, It was important to me to serve on the national board and eventually become president of the largest chefs organization, 40,000 chefs around the world in 40 countries. At the same time, Dorona, Distinguished Restaurants of North America, was the top 800 restaurants between Canada, United States, and Mexico. And I chair that organization because I think it's important that you become involved. And then the Research Chefs Association, I'm in food manufacturing. So why not be involved in research development, new product development, all of these things. So I think a career path should not only, and you're a great example of it. I mean, look at your career. You've certainly expanded. You're still within your field, but throughout your field, from publishing to all the things that you're involved in. So, yeah, absolutely. I would say that I'm chef first, and it's what I think my heart and soul thinks I am, because I do love food and I do love the Louisiana food experience. But no doubt about it, if it's food related or the overall social experience where people sit, dine, entertain around a table, I think it would interest me. So absolutely.
This may be a little esoteric, but I'm really curious about this. Being the only chef to ever be the chairman or president of the American Culinary Federation. I don't know, it seemed like if someone said something was named the American Culinary Federation, it would only have chefs as presidents or chairmen.
Well, I think the statement is that I'm the only chef ever to serve as president of all three of those organizations. I'm the only chef who ever served as president of the Chefs of America, Distinguished Restaurants of North America, and because these Research Chefs, these organizations are global. But yet at the same time, not one chef has ever served chair of all three of those, and I have. And I think that's what that statement is. Not that it's difficult to do. It's just a matter of commitment and time commitment and desire to do. You know, it amazes me when people say, how do you do all the things you do? And I'm always taken aback by that statement. It's people do what they want to do. People find the time to do whatever they want to do. I don't care what it is, and to serve as president of 3 different organizations or run the company that I run today, it's not hard to do because it is what I want to do, and I set my goals and my sights on accomplishment within those fields, and it's very simple. It's not a difficult task at all. Of course, you have to commit the time, and my time commitment and my commitment to my job comes from the fact my mother died when I was 7 years old, and there were 8 children in my family. There were 6 boys and 2 girls. My father was a French Cajun trapper. He trapped furs for a living. I came from probably the most meager, humble beginning you can imagine, as so many people in Louisiana did. My dad never remarried, so the oldest one the day Mom died was 10, I was 7. And they were twins 11 months old. And we lived in a swamp cabin where we trapped for mink and furs and alligator, and we ate the meat of the exotic foods of the swamplands. Everything we ate came off of the swamp floor pantry. There was, we really had nothing, yet we had everything. And it was an African-American woman who came into our home because of a promise she made accidentally to my mother, who she just happened to know. And as she was walking down the swamp road one day, this little road in the swamp, she saw my mother, who was ill, and sat down and they talked together for a moment. And this African-American woman holding my mother's hand, 1955, May, 99 degrees in the swamps of Louisiana, humidity over 100%. My mother dripping in sweat, ill, 8 children, twins, 10 months old. And my mother grabbed her hand and said, thank you so much for getting me the water and whatever she did. And she said, if anything ever happens to me, I would like for you to please just look in on these children. 2 weeks later, my mother was buried. This African-American woman had 6 children of her own, all young. She came into our house knocked on the door and told my dad, I promised your wife that I would look in on these children. Can I come in? And my dad said, absolutely. She came in. And it was that African-American woman who had nothing in a swamp cabin of 8 children who had nothing, all joined hands at one time to realize that all we had was ourselves and our heart and our ability to commit to the work that needed to be done. And it was through that teaching of commitment and following through on your promises and doing what you say you're going to do. And if you fail, apologize for it. If you do something you had no business, go and fix it. It's okay. It's okay. You can do anything, bad, good, and different. The great, just the unbelievable lesson of life we got from that African-American woman and my dad in a very impoverished background was, you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish if you remember it's all up to you. Nobody's going to give you anything. And when you talk about serving as president of 3 organizations or the things that I've done, I find them to be quite simple because it came out of a very meager background of doing what you say you're going to do. If you commit to serving as president and you want to do it, and do it better than anybody else could have ever done it. Whether you achieve that or not, I don't know. But I don't view any of my accomplishments as accomplishments. I view all of the things that have happened in my life as a follow-through to a commitment that I made. And whether it's revolution or whatever it is, I feel we're all on equal footing. Everybody in the world's on equal footing.
But you use a lot of imagination in what you've accomplished, meaning that I'm friends with a lot of chefs. Very few of them serve as president of anything. Very few of them are interested in other aspects of the industry that are not centered around being the star chef or actually cooking the food. When you start talking about food manufacturing, creating an institute in your own name, looking at dealing with other aspects of the business that really there's not a lot of sexy to it. And to some extent, when you agree to be the president of organizations, there's no money involved in it. Now, you and I both understand that, of course, with relationships, everything is created. I totally get the long-term vision. Right. But you understand what I'm saying about imagination. I want to understand why are you the only chef that I sit down and I look at the resume, and this is a very short, abbreviated resume for John Folse. Your resume is 3 pages long, and it's got all kinds of things on there, which I get. You can see that represents the culinary industry as a whole, but I mean, you're in a lot of different areas, on a lot of different ends of it.
Well, a journalist asked me a while back. She said, why did you become the first chef to open a restaurant in the Soviet Union prior to its fall? And before you answer that, why were you the first chef to open the first restaurant in China before Tiananmen Square? And she said, before you answer that, why were you the first chef to cook a Vatican State dinner for a Pope who's now going to sainthood? Pope John Paul, the first. Why were you the first? Is it your goal to always be first?
Okay.
And I looked at it, I said, no. I just wanted to do it. I had no money. I had no infrastructure. I had no media, barons behind me. I had nobody pushing me through the door. I woke up one morning and realized that the Soviet Empire, Russia, as a child, I had been jumping on the tables to practice Americanism versus communism, and that the big bomb was going to hit America soon, and we need to get under our desk. I was in 3rd grade. And I heard about Gorbachev and Reagan and President Reagan, and I heard about Yuri Gagarin, the cosmonaut, the first man in space. And one day I'm sitting down and say, I'd like to feed those people. I'd really like to feed those people. I'd like them to see what a young boy from the swamplands of Louisiana, that none of that mattered to me. Here I am today, and it took me 3 years of letter writing, going to Washington on my own dollar to go visit a congressman to ask them to help me get into the Soviet embassy, because I wanted to bring Louisiana's unique cuisine and culture to people who could never get it. And I wanted to do it, so I found out how to make that happen. Nobody could tell me, because nobody had ever done it. Nobody could tell me how to do it. I was just lucky enough to be so persistent at it that I found ways to make it happen. And eventually, a Soviet delegation in New York, I read in the newspaper, had been turned down in Atlanta to have a meeting in Atlanta with their delegation. And I immediately called Washington and told Senator Henson Moore, call him and tell him New Orleans is going to do that delegation. Send them to New Orleans. I didn't even have a place to put them. I didn't even know one soul in the city. And Henson said, what are you going to do with them? I said, I have no idea. But I got about 2 weeks, so let's get them over here. And it was that Soviet group that accepted my 10 people from the Soviet Union, who I knew nothing about, who came to New Orleans. And we had a meeting at the convention center. And then Paul Prudhomme and I marched them down Bourbon Street with little beads around their neck. They didn't have a clue what we were doing. All they were looking for was Stoloshanaya, you know. That's all they wanted. They wanted vodka. And they fell in love, and they said, and then I took them to have dinner at my restaurant. Limousines picked them up because I had a friend who owned a funeral home. So I asked if I could borrow his limousines to bring this Soviet delegation to my restaurant in the swamps of Louisiana in Donaldsonville. He said, yeah, if you pay for the gas. So I got 5 limousines, and I put $20 gas in each one and brought that Soviet delegation. And after that dinner, the guy stood up and he said, we will welcome you to Moscow. And I opened my restaurant. I went to Moscow with a ticket that they gave me to fly Aeroflot. Aeroflot. Nobody had ever been on Aeroflot from America, the airline of the Soviets. I went to New York, got on that plane. The plane took off. We were still walking in the aisles. Threw everybody down the side of the... That's how primitive it was. And I got to the Soviet Union. I didn't know who I was going to meet. I didn't have one name I was going to talk to. They just had a ticket for me to go to the World Trade Center. I stayed in a room 4 days before anybody contacted me to say we wanted to talk. And I left there 2 days later with a contract to open the first foreign restaurant in the Soviet Union since 1918. When Arm & Hammer, the great industrialist from California, went to Russia, to Siberia, to open up a lead for the plant for the pencil industry. 1918, the Bolshevik Revolution. And I opened my restaurant only to find out that Gorbachev had asked President Reagan to come to Moscow for the first summit of the Soviet Empire with America, and they needed food. And I just happened to be there asking to bring it. And I got to the Soviet Union. Same thing happened with China. So it wasn't because they chose me. It wasn't because I was the best chef. It was because I wanted to. And I didn't ask any question about how to make it happen. How often we get bogged down by saying, well, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. That's not my expertise. I don't have any money. And the litany of excuses about why I can't accomplish something is too much to even bear. When all you got to do is say, I want to do that. I'm going to go do that. And I've done it. So, and I've done it with a great group of people who believed and followed me into the fire. I couldn't do it. I'm a great visionary, but I need a lot of implementers. I can envision a lot of stuff. But I want to tell everybody out here today, if you think for a moment your greatness will be derived from what somebody's going to give you, you can forget about it. Your greatness is going to come about from getting out there and making the impossible happen and not even questioning how it's going to happen. It's all right here. It's It's all right there. So that's so you know, when they ask me how did that, why did you, I said because I wanted to. Simple as that.
1980. If someone would have said that there were going to be not only one but two networks, minus shows, two networks for people to watch people make food, that there would be competitions for people who are chefs and bakers and sommeliers. And if someone would have said that chefs were going to be rock stars, we'd all said they were crazy. As a matter of fact, when you ask someone back in the 80s whether or not they were a chef, you'd ask them, second question would be, what hotel do you work at?
Or you wouldn't answer it, you were embarrassed. In the 1970s, you were embarrassed to say you were a chef because you couldn't do anything else. The restaurant industry was a dumping ground for everyone who couldn't do anything else.
What happened? How did we get from 1970 to where we are right now today? Where I see musicians go on Emerald Show to promote their CDs.
Yeah. A couple of great things happened.
Okay.
First and foremost, it was President Carter, who I don't really know what else President Carter did.
All right.
But I know one thing President Carter did. He invited the world leaders to Williamsburg for the Williamsburg Summit of 1983. And at the Williamsburg Summit, he decided to bring 7 chefs representing the 7 culinary regions of America, because America had no culinary regions. America wasn't known for its food. If you're going to eat good food in 1970 and 80, you're going to go to a French restaurant, a German restaurant with Gunter Preuss. You were going to go to Danielle's restaurant. You weren't going to go to an American restaurant. American restaurant was what you ate at home. But President Carter invited 7 regions of America to come to Williamsburg to do the Williamsburg Summit and show the world leaders what American regional food was about. Prudhomme went and he cooked black and red fish. And the rest is history, right? So the world started to embrace American regional cuisine after the Williamsburg Summit. PBS had just started back in the 70s doing television cooking with Julia Child and Justin Wilson from Louisiana. Justin Wilson and Julia Child from Boston. That was the first 2 television shows out there. So now the American regional cuisine, oh my God, there's Floridian, oh my God, there's the Carolinas, there's Cajun and Creole, there's Southwest cuisine, there's Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. I didn't realize there was different foods of the nation. So the first thing was the introduction of regional American food at the Williamsburg Summit got people thinking about America really might have a cuisine. That's the first thing. And second of all, I think more than anything else was in the very early 80s when PBS had been on the air for quite some time, a single television station in New York decided to embrace a couple of cooks and start a program called the Food Network. They had no carriage. They only had one station in western New York. And it was through that medium that chefs started to get more on the national scene by doing food on television. So now you had PBS carrying food. Now you had the Food Network, a small group starting to grow, and they grew very, very quickly by, again, looking at regional chefs. And I was one of the first chefs called upon for Food Network. But in 1989, I had just signed my contract with PBS. I got a call 2 weeks later to ask me if I wanted to be one of the chefs on PBS. On Food Network. And I said, no, I've already got a contract with PBS. So of course, PBS started to grow its legions of cooks, and Food Network started to grow its legion of cooks. And all of a sudden, they all produced cookbooks, and there was an explosion of culinary, and then, of course, business opportunity. So that's what happened. It was the Williamsburg Summit that identified regional cuisine, and then it was PBS and Food Network that started to create the image of a chef as a celebrity. And then everybody thought it was an acceptable career path. And from that came groups like mine, because I'm on PBS nationally, and now all of a sudden people wanted John Folse's food. Now they wanted John Folse's cookbooks. I have 10 cookbooks I've written today because of PBS.
You call those cookbooks? Because some people call them history books.
Well,
2,000-page.
Yeah, I write encyclopedias, but my encyclopedia, I was very proud to have the first cookbook in America that received a national literary award. The first cookbook. Now, you hear another first? Another first. I didn't plan it. I just wrote the cookbook. And the Encyclopedia of Cajun and Creole Cuisine became the first cookbook to receive a national literary award because of the historic content on the front of the book. Again, was that planned? Did I start out to write a literary award winner? Of course not. I just was passionate about my story. I mean, you can tell I'm passionate about my story, right? so that's how it happened.
I got 3 questions before we open it up for our students to ask you some questions. The first 2 questions are really important that I want students to hear. What is the definition of Cajun, and what is the definition of Creole? And of course, we can use it in a culinary context, which I think would be great.
Well, Cajun is really fairly simple, and just on a quick note, there was a group of Frenchmen from Poitou and Vendée, which is on the western side of France, near what is now Normandy in that area, had been petitioning the King of France for years to form their own nation. They wanted to actually secede from France and become a nation called Brittany. And of course, Brittany and the coast of Brittany is right there on that coast of France. King wouldn't allow him to do it, so in 1620, Samuel Champlain, the great French explorer, needed to set up a colony in Canada that France owned. So this group of French families who wanted to secede decided the best way to do it would be to get on those ships of Samuel Champlain and take off in 1620 for ports unknown. They sail into the Bay of Fundy, which is right above Maine, 1621, and they sail into the Bay of Fundy, and one of the leaders of that group of Frenchmen looked up at these beautiful green hills up on the shores and he says that they should refer to this as Grand Prairie, the great prairie, the great green prairie, and we should name this land Acadie, from Homer's mythical Greek utopia Acacia, the land of milk and honey. So Acacia becomes the land of the Acadiens in French, or the Acadians in English, or Cajun as the slang. So they lived there from 1620 to 1750, when England comes and takes that whole area today, which is Toronto and all the way up to the French region of Quebec and Montreal, but that whole region of Nova Scotia. They changed the name from Acadie to New Spain, Nova Scotia, New Scotland. And the inhabitants now all English, so they exile the French out, and eventually those French refugees, in a movement called La Grande Dérangement, the great derangement, the great disbursement of people, they find themselves coming to Louisiana, thinking Louisiana is under French rule in 1760 when they arrive, but it's not. Spain has taken over Louisiana, but they allow them to stay. So the Acadians are that group of French who became known as Acadiens, exiled by the English in 1750 to 60, arrive in Louisiana thinking they can find their homeland here under the French rule. France is gone, Spain is here, so they settle the swamplands of Louisiana. St. Charles, St. John, St. James, Ascension, Iberville parishes. The first Acadian coast, of course, is St. James Parish, and that's where I'm from. So those Acadian settlers, their food is simply one-pot meals. Very simple, black iron pots out of the swamps of Louisiana, nothing fancy, wild game, a lot of seafood, wild vegetation, etc. The Creoles, on the other hand, the first time we see the word Creole being used is 1547. Remember, St. Augustine is founded in 1545, so it's the first settlement in North America. 1547, a child is born in Mobile Bay. Mobile is the capital of Louisiana. Remember that. Mobile Bay is the capital of Louisiana at the founding of the French. That's where they settled. They moved to New Orleans in the early 1700s. So Mobile is the capital of Louisiana. That's why they say Mobile founded Mardi Gras, right? But it's true, they did, because that was a French colony. So a child is born, and that child is born of the intermarriage of two cultures in Mobile Bay, and a priest named that child Jean Canaan was his name, Jean Canaan, and that child becomes known as the Crayola, the mixture of color. Crayola crayons, you with me? Crayola crayons, you following me? So the word Creole comes from where? Crayola, a mixture of color or culture. So Canaan is born, and then there's a big dispute about what does this word mean, this mixture of color. The colony moves to New Orleans, and all of a sudden we decide that Creole is to be the child of the intermarriage of the French and the Spanish. And that's to be Creole, aristocratic style. But the fact is that when Canaan was born in Mobile and the French priest christened him a Creole of the colony, he defined it. It was a child born of the intermarriage of two different nations on Louisiana soil. So to be Creole, defined in my book, the encyclopedia, which I caught more hell for than you can imagine.
That's why I asked.
That's right. I caught a lot of hell from all of so many historians, because I went back to the 1540s definition. I said to be Creole in the new encyclopedia when I wrote it is to be a child born on native soil, New Orleans now, of the intermarriage of the 7 nations that significantly contributed to the cuisine and culture of this state. Now that was a big leap, but that was the priest's definition, not mine. I just added significantly contributed. Why? Because the Native Americans were here first. 2,000 years before Christ walked the earth, there was a Native American settlement cooking and trading in Louisiana, 2,000 years before Christ, in present-day Delhi, Louisiana, near Monroe, Poverty Point. So Native American culture first. Native Americans intermarried with the coureurs de bois, the runners of the woods, the French trappers from Canada. They had children. They were born on native soil of two different cultures. Then you have the French from Paris coming in 1689 with La Salle. They intermarried with Native Americans as well. Then the next culture coming in is Spain. Spain arrived 1760. They come in, they intermarried with the French and the Indians. They're mixtures, born of different cultures on native soil. The Africans, they come in slavery against their will. They arrive here. Well, anybody want to tell me that the African women never had children with the French planters or the Spanish aristocrats? Of course not. They had children, mixtures, born on native soil. Of course Africans are Creole. Then comes German, the Germans, V-O-L-T-Z, F-O-L-S-E, French spelling of the German name, that's where I'm from. So the Germans intermarried. They were the farmers, they were the lumbermen, they were the construction. It was my 7th great-grandfather who built Michael Zorang from Gretna. 1700 arrives with the Germans and built St. Louis Cathedral in the first Ursuline convent. My 7th great-great-grandfather here in New Orleans. The Germans, the English arrive in 1770 after our War of Independence shot off in New England. They come to settle the toe of the boot of Louisiana because all lands east of the Mississippi River belongs to England in 1770. so they could come and settle Baton Rouge, Clinton, Jackson, and they had children with Spanish and Africans, and they were Creoles. And then finally the Italians. The Italians arrived after our War of Independence, 1865. The reunification movement in Italy failed with Garibaldi, so all the Sicilians moved here. They came as full families, but all those other nations came as explorers, mainly men. So they were quick to intermarry with all these other groups. The Italians were a little bit more persistent to remain their own, but it didn't take them long, because the Italian men worked on the docks in New Orleans and in the cane fields of Louisiana. They quickly intermarried. So to be Creole is to be born on native soil of the intermarriage of the 7 nations that significantly contributed to the cuisine and culture of Louisiana, and now it's adopted as the real thing, thank God. Including LSU, Tulane, everybody's finally said, okay, no problem. They said, we don't want to fight for it as much as you do. I said, because I'm fighting for honesty. I'm fighting for honesty. That's what I'm fighting for. And anybody want to debate, just sit up here. I could care less. I can take you. Because that's the facts. So that's Creole. So that's Cajun, very simplistic country cooking of the French Acadians, exiled to Louisiana, settling the swamplands. Creole, aristocrats, slaves, Englishmen, Italians, all different backgrounds, but as life would have it, they're going to all come together eventually. So that's the Creoles.
Third question. Who should be a chef?
Well, I think whether you like it or not, just about everybody's a chef. The difference is whether you're a professional chef or not. My school, the Chef John Folse Culinary Institute at Nicholls State University, we were the first culinary program in the country, I say the world, but definitely the country, to offer a Bachelor of Science in Culinary Arts. The first one, because I went to fight for the fact that chefs needed to have full college degrees. Because after all, we businessmen and women, we writers, we mathematicians, we scientists. Why shouldn't we have a college degree and be honored? The VOTEC schools are basically great programs, but they're just the key to the door of the kitchen if you want to be. So who should be chefs? Passionate cooks who are willing to devote their life and agree that they should spend their holidays and times in the kitchen celebrating the great life stories of the guest. People who are so willing to research and pay homage to the raw ingredients that the purveyors and the farmers and the fishermen and the ranchers bring to the table, and with respect create masterpieces. And let me say, when I say masterpieces, I don't mean wealthy, rich ingredients. The greatest masterpieces in the world are created from the simplest ingredients, because those are the toughest to create the great dishes with. That's where the masterpieces come from. So to be a chef is really everybody's life journey. You're going to be a chef. If you're going to raise a family, if you're going to cook a meal, you'll be a chef, because that's what chefs do. We cook. To be a professional chef means that you're taking that extra step to devote your life to representing a cuisine, representing a culture, and it's not for everybody. The culinary world is certainly not for everybody. Like musicians, I mean, we're entertainers. We're late nighters. We're people who are working on Christmas and working on Thanksgiving, and we're entertaining the world with our plates. And at the same time, we're creating great memories for people. Everybody's birthday. After we bury Dad at the funeral, we're going to go to the restaurant, and we're going to hold hands and talk about everything Dad did, and we're going to remember that. In our great crises of our lives, we always end it. Wars are ended with meals. The great battles that end all across the world finish with signing a treaty at a food table. It's a great, great world to live in. I mean, I've spent now almost 40 years. But I've also spent 20 before that cooking at home. And I was just lucky. I was lucky to have a great African-American mother who took us under her wing And I'm so proud to say that my 6 brothers, me and my 5 brothers, carried her coffin while her family looked on, because she carried us. And it was her husband was a fabulous butcher. All of my butchering techniques come from him. All of my respect of culture, my respect of cuisine, and my respect of good food comes from her. Because she told us all the time, she said, everybody always has a pot on the stove that's good enough to share with the world. If you can't share anything else, you can share your heart, you can share your table. And that's what I think chefs are all about, sharing your heart. And that's what sets us apart. It's not all about making money. It's not all about television. It's the unknown things that chefs do. When you have philanthropic events, who's there? The chefs are doing the cooking. No matter if there's big cancer events or heart events or whatever it is, the chefs are going to be the ones putting the food on. Chris and I were just last week at the big cancer event over at Harrods. We're gonna be opening the Sanger Theater. It's a charity event. We're opening it tomorrow night. I could go on and on. Who are chefs? We're all chefs. You just have to make a decision whether you want to devote your life to it or not, and then you have a nut like me, right?
All right, we do a thing where we do a word association and a Proust questionnaire. So I give you a word, you tell me the first thing comes to your mind. Okay. And I ask you a question, you say the first thing comes to your mind. You being a master historian, I know you're going to be excellent at this, and they're eagerly awaiting some of these responses to these questions that are coming. Okay. So you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Fish.
Cat.
Steak.
Filet.
Gumbo.
Leah Chase.
Chef.
Mary Fascio.
McDonald's.
Horrible.
Crawfish.
Foundation.
Wine.
Pinot Noir.
Cajun.
Lovable.
Swamp.
Home.
Vodka.
Russia.
Paul Prudhomme.
Father of.
Emerald.
Statesman, entertainer.
John Besh.
Culinarian.
What is your favorite word?
I mean, that's going to be pretty easy. When I think of the words that I think we should use most often, and I use it a lot, and that's love.
What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Need.
What turns you off?
Pomp, circumstances.
What is your favorite curse word?
Shit, I use it constantly. I use it constantly to define something. It's an adjective for some things I see, and it's also the way I feel sometimes.
What sound or noise do you love?
What sound? The trumpet.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Honking cars.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Historian.
What profession would you like not to do?
Wow, I respect him so much, but the garbage man. What a respect I have for him, though.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome in. Here's the stove.
All right. Questions for Chef John Folse.
Yes.
Do you think it's necessary for someone to go to culinary school in order to be a professional chef?
I don't think it's necessary, but I don't think it's necessary really to go to school to be the best at anything. It just makes you so much better, a much wider, or certainly a greater understanding, because you have so many resources to choose from. If I'm just in a kitchen learning on my own without the ability of instruction, the learning curve is huge. Whereas if I'm in culinary, I'm learning technique, I'm learning philosophy, I'm learning history, I'm certainly learning all of the different styles of culinary. Plus, I'm learning how to deal with personalities. So I think it's extremely important that when possible, schooling is always the most important thing you can do. You know, I'm always encouraged, and I encourage people when have you heard of the penny universities? I want you to know that some of the greatest thinkers, philosophers, scientists, writers in the world didn't go to school, a formal education. But they went to what was called the penny universities, and what that was, they would go in their hometowns, whether it was Brussels or whether it was Paris or whether it was London, and they'd pull up a chair next to the tables of the great philosophers and the great scientists and the great mathematicians and writers and musicians, and they'd just pull up next to them in a coffee shop, and for a penny they could buy a cup of coffee. And they'd sip on that coffee for hours while listening to the dialogue. And so many of them were so proud to say, I graduated from the penny university, because they had no way to get into a university, but they understood that to get the best learning, they had to be a part of where great learning existed. So they would go to these penny universities, they call them. So I think that's what's missing if you don't go to a school where you have all of these different personalities, all these different backgrounds, all these different socioeconomic levels that can all share into your learning. I think it's very important to go to school. I didn't go to a culinary school. I'm fortunate to have one named after me. But I went to the Penny University. You can believe that. Okay.
Next question.
Another question, anybody? Yes.
What are some of your favorite meals or foods from the swamp?
Well, you know, I always say my last meal. My grandmother used to make just an unbelievable chicken and sausage gumbo, just an unbelievable one. And she was German, and she taught me that the best way to eat a gumbo was with a scoop of German potato salad right on the rim of the bowl, and you'd scoop a little bite of that into the bowl, and you ate it as a single unit. And I always say my last meal, if I had a chance to choose it, it would be that big bowl of chicken and smoked sausage gumbo with that scoop of potato salad in the bowl. But you know, I have a saying that I think is very important, and I have two sayings actually that's written on the walls of my school. But one of them was a statement made by Edith Stern, who owned Longview Gardens here in New Orleans. She married the heir to the Sears fortune, Sears Roebuck stores out of Chicago. And General Eisenhower was coming to New Orleans on a campaign trip in the 50s when he was running for president. And she was very calm, and her cooks at the house were at Longview Gardens over in Metairie, were just like going crazy. What are we going to cook? Well, here's the general. He just won World War II. He's this. Well, what are we going to cook? What are we going to cook? What are we going to cook? We need to do. And she said what I really believe in today. It's what I carry in my heart. She said, just calm down. She says, the more important the guest, the simpler and more regional the food, because that's what they come for. They don't want to eat the Chateaubriand of France when they come to New Orleans. They want a simple gumbo. They want a jambalaya. When they come to New Orleans, look at the music they want to hear. So the simpler and more regional affair. So when you ask me what I like the simple regional dishes. I don't care who's coming to my house. That's what I'm cooking, the simpler. And I have another saying which is written on and it's my philosophy of business. And it's what I have carried from the day I opened my business 40-something years ago till today. And it's written on the wall of my culinary school. It's the only saying that I've done. I got a few of them, but it's the only one that I've really ever printed, and it's been quoted all over the world. Risk is the tariff paid to leave the shores of predictable misery. Risk is the tariff paid, is the price you pay to leave the shores of predictable misery. So just think of where you are. Think of where you've been. Think of what you might want to do. And somewhere along the way, you're going to say, I'm not a risk taker. Well, you know what? Risk is the tariff paid. It's the price you pay to attain greatness in your life. Don't ever be afraid of risk. Just make sure it's responsible risk. Okay? Don't kill the goose that lays the egg. You might want to starve it a couple days, but don't kill it. Okay?
Next question.
Next question, anybody? Yes.
So what was your chef career like while you were obtaining all these presidential positions? Did you kind of have to put that on hold or step back from that a little while?
Never.
You did. So you were still full-time cooking and being involved with all these
Absolutely.
organizations?
Absolutely. I opened my restaurant in Russia when I didn't even have a sous chef in my kitchen. Because if I'd have said, well, I can't do it because, I could have stopped right there, right? Well, I can't do it because I don't have enough cooks, or I don't have enough. You know, you just have to make it happen. You know, and I tell, there's a wonderful African American guy who I had such respect for. Herman Paradin was his name. Herman Paradin. And Herman Paradin was interesting because he was an African American cook at a time when African American cooks owned the kitchens of America but could not get any recognition. Even in New Orleans, the greatest restaurants in New Orleans were run by African American men and women. But they got no credit or recognition for anything they did in these kitchens. All of your great dishes that you call New Orleans food were created at the hands of the African cooks. They were the black hand in the pot, I called it. The loving black hand in the pot. They had done so long with so little that they could make anything with nothing. They were great at what they did. They were great innovators. And you know, when you think of just the responsibility, when you think of the ability that these people had without any recognition whatsoever, that's kind of the way I felt about my life as well. I didn't mind, you know, whether it was opening restaurants somewhere or whether, I always just knew that if you were going to do it, you didn't worry about who got credit for it or any of those other things. You just went out there and made things happen. These great, and I don't know exactly. I was answering somebody's question. I think I got off subject a little bit. What was the question y'all had asked?
About stepping back while you were designing these
I never really worried about that. I just knew that the time was right to do something. I went and I made it happen. I came back. I was gone for 2 or 3 weeks. I came back. I did it. I jumped right back in, and I put my trust in the cooks in our kitchen. I put our trust in these cooks who had great imagination, and then I came back in and jumped in. I was in the swamplands of Louisiana with my first restaurant for 25 years. There was no cooks. There was no chefs to hire. So you just went out and you got the best cooks you could find. And my kitchen was, as so many other kitchens, was 90% African-American cooks who were really great at what they did. And none of us really cared who got the recognition. Everybody was just doing great work, and it's again the foundation I stand on. So it's I would definitely say that don't ever let a circumstance stand in the way of achievement, because there's always going to be circumstances that's going to just come and block you so fast that if you allow it to happen, it's going to happen. It's going to happen every single day. Another question, anybody? Yes.
When you found yourself saying you can't in your life, What did you do to turn that around?
Well. Let me make sure I emphasize that it wasn't that I didn't feel I couldn't. There's a lot of times I didn't feel I couldn't. I mean, I felt I couldn't. It just wasn't my DNA. And even today it's the same thing. I mean, the biggest complaint I get from my staff today is that I never say no. I never say no. And Chris will tell you back there in the room, I mean, I have a full staff of people around me now. And they say, I'm 67 years old. I'm 67 years old. I'm almost 70 years old. And so, I mean, 70 may be young for some people, and 70 may be extremely old for other people. But at 70, I'm still opening companies because I just, it's what I do. And I don't look at it, I don't say, well, I'm 70, it's time to retire. Well, you know, half of my brothers younger than me are retired, and they can't, you must be crazy. Why do you keep doing this? So it's because I don't know what can't means. I think every day you can have doubt. It's normal. If you don't have doubt, then you're a psycho, right? So sure you have doubt, but you dig really deep down into your heart and soul, and only you will determine what you can and can't do. Don't let any circumstance, money, time, people, don't let any of that influence your ability to achieve anything. Because at the end of the day, you'll be measured by what you did. You'll never be measured by what everybody told you to do. And let me tell you, coming from the swamps of Louisiana, where I came from, nobody's going to tell me what they can't do. Nobody. Because I hadn't done the impossible. You can't do the impossible. I did the possible. A lot of people thought it was impossible. So don't worry about it. Don't get hooked up on any of that kind of stuff about can't and won't. Everybody has restrictions. I mean, everybody, I mean, you know, I realize at some point you can only, look, I have, as of today, I have 3 honorary doctor's degrees from 3 great universities. I just did the graduation speech at Nicholls State University and got a doctorate of commerce. I didn't graduate from college, but I got 3 doctorates. Does that make me smart or anything else? No, it doesn't. What I'm saying is you don't, you know, my path didn't take me there. My path took me somewhere else, and I just kept going and never questioned why. I never questioned why. Stickability, I call it. Stickability. Just stick to it. Okay? And don't be ashamed to fail. Don't ever be ashamed to fail. Fail is just an opportunity to start over again, right? I've done some of those too. It hadn't all been good.
Next question.
I know I'm running late here on some of y'all.
Where do you think the best Playboy in New Orleans is?
Parkway. What you think, Chris?
I don't know. Parkway's good.
What you mean
I'll
Parkway
give
is
you
good?
that one.
Well, maybe I should say where's the best roast beef?
Which type of football? Right.
What kind of football? I guess it's probably the best. Because look, I go to a little Disney bar. I tell you what, they gotta go, man. They slap a shrimp po' bar together, make you want to hang yourself. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, there's I make a pretty good po' bar myself.
What you say, Paul?
Huh?
Katie's.
Where?
Katie's.
Oh, Katie, yeah. Look, you know, there's so many dogs. You know, that's the problem in New Orleans. The problem in New Orleans is I don't care where you go. You know, chances are pretty good. You know, and there's some place when people tell me, man, if you want the best po' bar, go here. And I say, what? People ain't got no food. And, you know, I hate to say that, but I said, what? Are you kidding me? Or what? I said, man, that's the last place I'd go.
Last 2 questions.
Yes, yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was actually working in the French Quarter when you guys first opened up, and I was wondering if you got any resistance from all the other restaurants around you because of the innovative twist that you were bringing to the French Quarter.
You know, what a great question. What a great, you know, when people ask me what I'm most amazed about at Revolution, and by the way, the name of the restaurant, Revolution, R apostrophe Evolution. I didn't want the city to think that we were so arrogant that we were coming into the city with a revolution of, that wasn't what it was about. R with the apostrophe Evolution was about revolutionary thinking about how you present food in a city that's so famous for food and service and music and everything else. I just wanted to choose a name that would say there's something different here. There's a revolution going on, but it's not about me having the best food. We were very fortunate. We took the best new restaurant in New Orleans in the first 6 months. We became the top 10, one of the top 10 restaurants in America in the first year. Fact is, we were named number 6. I was aggravated by that too. I thought we were better than number 6. Condé Nast and American Express named us number 6 in the United States in the first year. We just got the 100 best wine list in the United States. That's pretty good. That's not what we started out to do. I mean, we didn't start out, it's just like my life. I mean, we just wanted to go out and do it right and pay homage to the 7 nations that created the food. I wanted people to know when they ate the food where it came from. That's why when you eat my corn and crab bisque, you have popcorn on the plate, because I want you to know that's an Indian gift. When we eat the gumbo zab and we have that filet powder and all of that, we want to know it's a Native American African dish. We want people to know where it comes from, that these are important dishes. So we didn't start out to do any of that. What I am most proud of is how the city has embraced us. Before we opened our restaurant, we went to every restaurant in town of the caliber of Revolution, all the Grand Dame restaurants. We visited every one of them and said 2 things. Number 1, we would appreciate any recommendations, suggestions for us. We're newcomers to the city. I only grew up 70 miles out of the city, but I never had a restaurant here. I'm a newcomer. And I said, second of all, I want you to know we will not hire any of your people. I want you to know that. We're not going to hire. If somebody quits your restaurant and comes to apply at Revolution, I'm going to call you. I want you to know we went to all the restaurants. We wanted to set the pace of what Revolution was all about, that we respected the industry. This is the top restaurant town in the nation. I don't care what anybody says. You can talk about New York, you can talk about LA, you can talk about all of them. I could care less. This is the food town in America. And that's why it's such a popular destination. But we were coming in here as newcomers. And we wanted the city's hierarchy, including all the Brennans, including Emerald, including John Besh, including Susan Spicer, I mean, all of them. We wanted all of these people who had worked so hard to create Dickie Brennan, Ralph Brennan. We wanted them all to know we are coming here humble, and we're coming here to earn our place. We're not coming here to beat you up. And we got a lot of respect because that's the way I live my life. I wanted people to know we respected them. And we're not going to do anything to trample or say we're here to do the best and all that. We were just coming here to work hard. We got a great staff. We got a great staff that couldn't even figure out what we were doing when we started off, because we taught them history for the first 8 weeks of training. They sat in our restaurant and started to learn about the history. The Africans came from Senegal and Gambia, and they brought with them this, and they brought with them that, and you eat yams, and you eat black-eyed peas, and you ate this, and they said, well, when are we going to learn about the food? Where's the menu? And we said, we'll tell you when the menu comes. We're testing you now on the history and the culture of the city and the food. So the city did a beautiful thing for us. They embraced us in a big way. In the national media, I mean, Rick and I went out there and we pulled in all of our cards too, you know. We didn't play around. We didn't play around either. We were working hard to get it done. And of course, now we're now we're in a good place. You know, we're in a good place right now. And we're going to open Seafood Revolution, which is going to be announced pretty soon. It's a brand new restaurant, all Gulf of Mexico seafood. It's going to be an ultimate design, just like everything we do in our business, and I want you all to hear this. Everything we do in our business has to have its own story. When we built Chris's Kitchen, the equipment, the design, the color had to be its own story, so that every equipment manufacturer wanted to see it, and every equipment design magazine wanted to photograph it and carry a cover story. They did. The wine cellar. Our wine cellar has over 12,000 bottles of wine in it, over 1,500 selections, and it's valued today, 1 year after we opened, at $1.7 million of wine. $1.7 million of just wine bottles. Wine Spectator carries a story of the wine cellar. Wine Aficionado carries a story. Riedel Glassware carries a story. Restaurant Design Magazine covers the design at a restaurant. Everything you do has to carry its weight to get you maximum publicity. And that's what we do when we design. We design where there's a story. Every element has a story. That way, the minute you open, there's 10 different, from restaurant design to color, to the stoves and coolers, to the food. Everything's carrying its own story out across the national media. And that's what made Revolution jump up so fast in front. It was well planned. It wasn't by accident. It was revolutionary.
Last question.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to have two questions. I can ask the shorter two.
Well, go ahead. You can ask two. He can elect to answer what he wants.
Okay, well, I guess I'll just, Mother's Restaurant.
Right.
Yeah. What's your opinion of Mother's Restaurant? Because it's like, it's well known, like it's a spot that tourists are directed to. What's your opinion of
Before you ask, what's your opinion of Mother's Restaurant?
I mean, well, I went
That's
there.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, I went there when I first came to New Orleans, and I was like, whoa, this place is amazing. There's all these pictures of celebrities everywhere. It was a cool experience. But I know, since going throughout the city and living here, I've been here for more than 3 years now. And, I mean, I haven't really been there since my first, 2 times.
Right.
So in my opinion, it's not as spectacular as it's made out to be, but I was wondering about your opinion of the food and service and the history of the restaurant.
Well, you know, when I was in 11th grade, at St. James High School down the river, all the beautiful girls had been picked for the prom before I got around to asking. So I just had to say, okay, come on, let's go to the prom, me and you out there. So, you know, everything has its place. I think it depends on the psyche that you have at the moment. If I want a great debris sandwich, I know I can go to Mother's and get it, whereas I might not be able to get that debris sandwich anywhere else. At the same time, Jerry Amato might be sitting there, and his family's owned that restaurant since World War II. It was an old hangout for military men after the war to come and hang out and tell their stories. It's a restaurant that no other corner in New Orleans can possibly have. What makes it unique is its uniqueness. Nobody else has it. So if you want to experience Jerry Amato and his debris sandwich and look at the memorabilia from a time gone by, Jerry's the place to go. If you want the best po' boy in town, you're going to come with me to Fairway. There's something about the uniqueness of that place that makes it what it is. It might be the ambiance, the outdoor seating, it might be the televisions falling off the wall, it might be the bags of French bread on the floor, it doesn't matter. It has its place. And I think that's the way life is. So I think what you're really asking is, what do we consider the perfect place for the perfect time? Maybe Revolution is the perfect place, or Commanders is the perfect place, or Tabla is the perfect place for that romantic prom date or that great that great event that you want to create a memory, you're going to go there. But at the same time, there's a place and a time for everything, and so I never judge a restaurant as comparing it to something that it's not. And I do that with everything else. I mean, I drive a Range Rover. You know, my wife drives a Mercedes, and my brother drives a Camry, and all three of them get us to the store. But they all have a place. You know, I like my Range Rover because I'm on the road all the time driving. My car is 4 months old, and I was telling Chris I got 34,000 miles on it in 4 months. I need a Range Rover. I need something heavy under me, right? No, it's true. True story.
No.
I have 34,000
I laugh
miles.
because my car is almost 9 years old, and I have 37 miles.
My wife's Mercedes is 3 years old, and she's got 18,000 miles on it. I passed up in 4 months twice. So, but anyway, that's a great question you ask. It really is a great question you ask, and the answer is very simple. Every place has its time, and you know why you go there, and you can make a decision not to go there because you found something that during the time when you want very casual and you just want to be funky, you want to hang out, there's another place that fits that need for you right then. But there's not going to be any place in town like Mother's. And you can't imagine, a lot of times I wish I made the money Mother's made serving that debris sandwich, you know what I mean? So that's a great question. I think every place is different, and a lot of places are unique because of their uniqueness, is the way to put it. You know, it's just very interesting places. And I hadn't been to Mother's in a couple of years. Jerry's probably cussing me out, you know, but I used to I used to stop there. In fact, I got a picture on the wall in there. I got a picture on the wall in there, which I think is pretty interesting. But yes, last question.
Being New Orleans is such a food town, what took us so long to get our first 5-star restaurant?
Well, it didn't take us long. I mean, the first 5-star restaurant was actually before they started measurement in modern times. And I mean, Warren LaRuth, who had his restaurant, LaRuth's restaurant in Gretna, was the first 5-star restaurant in the South. It was in New Orleans, and it was in Gretna. It wasn't even in New Orleans, but it was so famous. I think the South in general has been in many ways shunned for a lot of reasons. And most of it you can trace back to Reconstruction after the Civil War, you know, poverty, the whole Southern issue. And even though the South is known for its romanticism, and the South is known for its beautiful music and its beautiful people and its diversity and its wonderful food, as a nation, we've pretty much looked down on the South. So even though there was fabulous things happening here, the African Americans would have never gotten credit for cooking, even though they were cooking the best food you could find anywhere in the nation. Never do that. Never give those restaurants credit. I mean, D.H. Holmes grocery store had a clothing store had some of the best food in the world under Austin Leslie and these African chefs. People just looked at the South as it was supposed to be what it was. It's just the South. And we've come a long way to change that, but I want you to know we still drag that plow behind us too. We still pretty much, in many ways, look down on and not quite deserving what we got. The great food in New Orleans, not quite, well, it's just Cajun and Creole, you know, it's not that big of a deal. We still live a lot of that mess. Look at our reality television. Our reality television is going to be about swamp creatures, about Duck Dynasty is the #1 show on cable television. Bunch of guys with long beards and guns and cutting up out there, and so what does the nation think when they look at that? Oh, that's those Southerners. You know, nothing but moonshine and shotguns. Well, you know, it makes a lot of money for a lot of people, but unfortunately it doesn't help our image. Not that I have anything other than that to say about them. I mean, I'm sure these are fine people. These are fine people. I know they are. They're good church-going people. I mean, they're good Christians. They do a lot for their community. But when the media looks for what to portray here, they're going to portray that because that's what they want people to see. And I'm very disturbed about that a lot of times. They like to talk about the story of segregation and integration. They ain't going to talk about John Folse opening restaurants around the world and John Folse being president of 3 things, raised by a black woman. He was a white boy. They ain't going to talk about that. They don't want that story. They want to talk about how I might have hated a black man. You know, crazy stuff. And I understand it. Believe me, I don't belittle it or put it down. I just know that there's a lot of other great stories about people who come together just like this. People who love each other, respect each other, but yet what are they going to show? They ain't going to show that. And look, I don't diminish anything else either. There's a lot of tragedy that's going on in the South that needs to be repaired, and I think it is being repaired. Maybe slower than we wanted to, some of us, but I also understand and respect it. But that's a great question. Why did it take so long? I think that's why. I think people knew we had good food. They know we have good people. They know we have great music, and they know where they're going when they want to get away. They come in here. But they ain't ready to give it to us yet. They ain't ready to give it to us.
I think our guest, John Folse.
I appreciate it, y'all. Now, if I said anything to offend anybody, I apologize. I hope I didn't. Just remember my one word, stickability.
Thank you, Chef.
Thank you, man. You're a good man. You're good. I know you don't owe me. I owe you.